Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Hello and welcome to another episode of Living the Dream with Curveball. I'm your host, Curveball, and today we're going to talk about finding your direction with purpose and passion. I am joined by Zack Ballinger. He has written a book, Don't Be a Zombie, Finding a Career You Love. 70% of Americans hate their jobs, so we're going to talk to him about why he thinks that's the case, about his book, and how to cure that hating your job. So, Zack, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Why don't you start off by giving the audience a little bit of background about yourself, maybe where you're from and anything else you would like them to know?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. So, I'm right here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a motivational speaker, author, and fellow podcaster. I host a podcast show, The Zack Ballinger Show, where our vision's really to create a career library of occupations and jobs throughout North America to shine a light on things. As I've gone over the United States speaking to different colleges and high schools, people don't realize what kind of careers are out there a lot of the times. They don't realize what a consultant is, or what an artist does, or a graphic designer, or architect. And so we're putting get together that library right now. Like you mentioned, I just launched a book, Don't Be a Zombie, How to Find a Career You Love. That launched in November, really a platform to help people find work they love. I've been motivational speaking since about 2015 on job interviewing, and curveball, as I went across the United States teaching people on job interviewing, people weren't asking job interviewing questions at these workshops. They were asking, hey, I'm in a line of work I don't like, or I'm not satisfied with my career, or I feel like I'm stuck. Can you help me with that kind of advice? And so that's what led to my next chapter, my journey in this new book.
Well, what made you even get into the things you got into before your book, speaking to colleges and even talking about job interviewing?
Yeah, for me, it started with failure. When I got out of college, I really didn't know anything about job interviewing, and they don't teach us a lot of times that career development angle. And sometimes we don't do it as a student. I'll, freely admit I didn't visit any career service center or do anything like that. I just went out there and started job interviewing, and it took me about 250 interviews with over 50 companies. I failed at that many before I actually got my job outside of college. And then, I was in the industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, and I started working there, and I began to get questions about job interviewing. What can I do better? What can I do this? And I thought, well, maybe the best thing I can do is set a goal for myself to write a book and help people along that journey. I know a lot of us get nervous during job interviews, or we're not sure where it's trending. And so the book kind of started off my speaking career. And speaking's always been my passion. I enjoy platform skills. I enjoyed giving presentations at corporate America, but I never knew that was anything to be good at. I always just thought everybody kind of can give a presentation. And so really the content from the book, The Hot Seat, How to Meet the Challenge of a New Era in Job Interviewing, launched my speaking career into where I can talk to professionals and students about different career development topics, such as networking, such as job interviewing, and like I said, such as self-discovery of finding that job that you really do enjoy.
Well, let's talk about some job interviewing tips that you've learned over the years and also talk about how important networking is when you're job interviewing and even doing your career.
Yeah, networking is the key. And that's what I keep telling people over and over. The famous career author and coach in North America, Ken Coleman, says a resume without a relationship is dead. And it's so true. What that means is you have to have a contact or somebody at that company a lot of times that can vouch for your character and your skills. in order to get your resume to the top of the pile. If you look at jobs, as incomes go up, the competition goes up. So as you can probably realize, there's probably sometimes 200 or 250 job applicants for one position. And so an average hiring manager in North America looks at your resume 6 seconds. So how do you get your resume to the top? Well, a lot of that's about networking and having that key contact in a company. So let's say you wanted to be a software programmer at IBM. Well, the best place to start would be somebody in the industry, somebody at that company, and all this can be done via LinkedIn. When I grew up, we didn't have these type things. You had to do it in person or face to face, or show up at corporations, or stand outside the doors and network with people that way, or go to events. But now everything's done virtual. COVID's had a little bit of help as far as the virtual community. So everything's people are used to networking online now. So it's actually a great opportunity to really grow your network in your social media platforms, especially if you're a professional. And LinkedIn is the great tool to do that. And then I say the biggest thing about job interviewing is practice, practice, practice. And it sounds so cliche, but on sitting on the other side where I'm actually interviewing candidates, people keep repeating bad answers and they don't even realize that they're repeating bad answers. And how do you know if an answer is bad? They haven't really practiced with a professional. And so if you mock interview with somebody that or, if you're a college student at a career service center, or maybe you're a professional that needs to hire a career coach, and they can guide you through these interview processes. And just think, if you're ready and you're practiced and prepared with somebody or a professional or a coach, think about what's going to happen in that job interview. The last tip I would give is, the great thing about job interviews, you should know what they're going to ask you. So, in my book, I lay out the commonly asked questions. You can even Google the commonly asked questions. Tell me about yourself. What's some of your weaknesses? A lot of employers ask star format questions that are based on themes, whether leadership or communication, customer service, and have examples ready to go where you can give these employers. I think employers sometimes are at a disadvantage because we already know the questions. It's like a college student or a high school student going into a test. We already have the questions that they're going to ask us. So let's be prepared in those answers that we're able to give to the hiring manager.
Some job interviews are tougher than others. So, what industries and jobs or careers do you think have the toughest interview questions? Government interviews are pretty tough. You have to do it with a panel.
Yeah, different industries are different. I think, where you have to do a math problem or anything like that, because I'm not good at math, like an engineering, a lot of times those particular job interviews, you'll actually have to share your screen and work through a problem. So I think that can be challenging to people that do it. Or other times, some certain industries, they make you do a presentation beforehand, or if you're going into maybe a sales profession that's tough to get into, they might have you do a practice sales call. Hey, sell me this pen. I think a lot of the job interviews, if you look at it, the toughest interviews are going to be some of the interviews on the high paying scales, where you're competing against many, many candidates. So right now, the hot job on the market is a software developer. You can go down the street and you can go to most companies and you can get a software development job. But if you go to, for an example, a career that's kind of scarce, or, there's less people in it, say you want to be a detective for the state, there's rigorous interviewing. They're going to be interviewing on your aptitude test, on your skill test. So there's a lot of different fields that are tougher. I think that's a great question. A lot of your doctor interviews, a lot of college students are coming out and they're competing to get into med school. And so those interviews are often big panels, 6 or 7 faculty members that are asking you questions. Those can get kind of nerve wracking. And if they only accept a certain amount of medical students per college, obviously you're going to have to really do well, and that's going to be a tougher interview. So I think, to answer your question, the higher the income and the less the less jobs out there in that particular field, it's going to be definitely a harder push. So even for a CEO level, you think about this, the C-level suite executives. Well, there's not many big companies that have a CEO. I mean, there's one. And so, if you're going around and you're interviewing at different companies to be a chief executive officer, obviously those are going to be very rigorous interviews as well.
What's the main reason do you believe that people who are going on job interviews fail, or why they might not get the job once they get the interview?
Such a great question. I think sometimes, let's step back from what you just asked, is sometimes it's not the candidate's fault. And a lot of times it's not. For example, they may already have an internal candidate that, hey, is right up, they've done the right thing for 10 years. They're ready for that new position. And by state law, the company has to post that job. And so you may get beat out by an internal candidate. And while that's tough to hear, that does happen. Or it may come down to you have two really great candidates. You may be the really good one too. And just something little set you apart. It might be a fit on a team, honestly. Like maybe you don't have the skills, maybe presentation skills or something that's simple. So don't blame yourself at first. And I think another thing is, if it is people's fault, it's because they're not prepared enough. And so I've seen that happen too, where I wish I could have given feedback at times, and sometimes corporate America doesn't let you do that because of the HR laws and everything. But there's certain habits and things that people do, and I think a lot of it comes down to being prepared. And if you're able to practice and verbalize these things, a lot of it comes out different. I always tell people, this sounds cheesy, but with your interview questions, you can even verbalize it in front of a mirror. And, that may be awkward and everything, but I'd even say record those answers on the phone, play it back to yourself and see, hey, does this sound any good? And again, work with professionals, but I don't think there's any one holy grail thing that really prevents it. I think a lot of times there's just a stiff competition in the job market, and sometimes you lose out, and that's okay. But what we got to learn to do is to take those key connections. And that's why I say never burn a bridge with a hiring manager you're interviewing with. I have a story where I was in pharmaceutical sales and I was trying to get in, and they didn't hire me the first job posted, but he said, you came in second. And so another position opened a couple of years later. He didn't end up hiring me. Was pretty devastated, but I didn't get mad. I didn't lose my cool. I kept network with him. Every 3 or 4 months, I would follow up, and bam, a third position opened, and he hired me right away. So, keep at it, use grit, tenacity, don't give up.
You talked about being prepared. Other than doing a mock interview or doing your questions in the mirror, what other tips would you give interviewers to be prepared for an interview?
Yeah. So, what's the big trend right now in interviews is a virtual setting, and a lot of them ask behavioral questions. So, they want to know how you would behave in a certain situation. And those questions are called situational questions or behavioral. And there's a way to answer those questions, and it's called STAR format. And that's situation, task, action, result. And if I gave you an example, so for examples, in a job interview, they may say, well, tell me about a time you had to deal with a difficult customer. And so they want to know your communication skills, your sales skills, your people skills. And so have these answers ready to go in a STAR format. So, STAR situation. What is it you are asked to do? The task. What did you personally do in that situation that changed the action? The action is what actually happened and what you did in that situation. And then the result, make sure the result's something positive. So if I were to verbalize something with you where they said, name a time you've had to deal with a difficult customer, something might look like this. Yeah, a customer called, they were angry, didn't get their order in time. He threatened to pull all the business. He was one of our top customers in the company. I talked to my supervisor. I calmed him down. I sent an apology email. I worked it out. I talked to him over the phone. And through my boss, I was able to get permission to ship his order for free and not charge him anything for that particular order. And then the next few orders, I decided to make a plan where he was going to get 10% off of his shipping. And this is what it led to. It led to actually him being a loyal customer. Me and him are still close today, and he's still one of the top 10 producing customers. So if you have these examples and these star questions and these behavioral questions ready to go, that will help in your interview. Make sure you write a thank you note after your interview. A lot of times candidates skip this step, and you can often, let's say they had something about you, an objection in the interview. They said, well, I don't know if you had enough leadership experience, or I don't know if you have enough Excel experience or whatever. Sometimes in those emails, those thank you letters, you can prove what your objection is in those. And so, in other words, one time somebody said, I don't really understand how you organize your business. And so what I did is I emailed them a copy of my business plan and wrote a nice thank you letter and said, I hope this helps you understand. Ultimately, I did get the job, but thank you letters are a critical part in sealing the deal with the interview.
Talk about your books, give a brief description of what they contain for listeners who might want to check them out, and also any other projects that you might have coming up, any speaking engagements or any podcasts that you might run or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So, the first book I talked about is, how to meet the challenge of a new era in job interview, and it's called The Hot Seat. And that takes you from a phased approach. Phase one is the beginning, what to do before the interview. And then phase two is what to do during the interview, how to conduct yourself, what kind of questions will be asked, all that. And number three is what to do afterwards. So most people do one and two in their phase in their job interview, but they don't know to do number three, and that's close it out, what to do after you actually leave that seat with that hiring manager. And so that's my first book. The second book is Don't Be a Zombie, How to Find a Career You Love. You kind of touched on at the beginning, 70% of people don't really like their jobs. And so if you find yourself unsatisfied with the line of work you're in and you don't really have answers, the book is actually gives you tactics, what to do day one, day two. I give you a 25-day plan of where to begin. I like to have plans. I'm a very, very somewhat organized person, and I like to have action items, what to do. And the book lays out specific action items for you to do over time and why it's important for you to find true passion and purpose in your own career. And then just going on Thursday, I have a Zoom meeting with the University of Southern Alabama. I'll be speaking to college students there about job interviewing. That's a particular hot topic right as they're entering into the marketplace. The podcast, you can watch me on YouTube. Go on YouTube and type in Zack Ballinger. I have my YouTube channel there, as well as Facebook, the Zack Ballinger. And the podcast, before, we take career questions too. So I forgot to mention that. Not only are we doing the career library, but also, I have people from all over America, and I find it really rewarding when somebody sends in a question. And we have people send in questions all the time to Zack at zackballinger.com. If you have any career questions you want to ask, I read those anonymously on air to my expert, and me and the expert will weigh in and try to give you advice. And we do those shows once a week. So you're welcome to subscribe to the channel for free. Check out the career library, as well as if you've got any questions for us and me and my expert that comes on every week, come in and join us.
You mentioned Facebook and YouTube. Are you on Instagram? And go ahead and give out your website so
Yeah.
listeners can connect with you.
Thank you. I am on Instagram too. Instagram / the Zack Ballinger, and that's ZACK. And my website's going under construction right now, but it's up and it could be down any minute now. But that's where we'll be uploading the career library, as well as some other free resources for you guys, the listeners. And that's zackballinger.com, ZACK, zackballinger.com. You can link to all my social media links as well there too.
So give some final advice to all the people out there that are looking for a job. Let's say I'm going in for a job interview Friday, and I came to you and said, Zach, I need some advice. Give me some final tips and advice along with the listeners about what to do to try to nail that top job that I've always dreamed of.
Yeah, I would say, did you study your job description and do you have it memorized? Because a lot of times the Bible to the church is a metaphor I like to use. Your job description is your holy grail. It has all the answers on it if you think about it. And if you study that job description, you know exactly what they want in a person applying for that job. They give you the words oftentimes: must have strong written communication skills, must have strong analytical skills, must have this type of experience. And then the way that helps too is if you don't have that type of experience, focus in on your strengths. For example, some business people, they say, well, Zach, this job description says I need an MBA. I say apply anyway. That might be their A plus wish candidate list, but talk about your experience, talk about what you've done in the volunteer world, talk about what you've done there, really highlight your strengths. So I would say, wrap your head around that job description. I would also say prepare some type of portfolio to bring with you to that interview, especially if you're going to a physical interview. What is a portfolio? It's got questions you're going to ask the hiring manager. You want to make sure when they say, hey, do you have any questions for me? You don't say, no, I'm good. You want to have thought-provoking questions and make sure they're good questions where you show you've done your homework and your research. And so do you have your questions prepared to ask the hiring manager? Do you have notes? So when you ask questions, you write down what the hiring manager is saying so you can reflect back to them when you're writing your thank you letter. Do you have a pen? Do you have a pad? Do you have a portfolio? Do you have several copies of your resume ready with you? So are you prepared for that when you go in there? And so that's going to be really key too. And then the last point I would say, if you're going in there and they've given you an assignment, make sure you've run that by several professionals in your network. If they want you to do a presentation or they want you to do some type of problem solving skills, make sure you've rehearsed that, you practiced it, you prepared it, and you're ready to go. And then the final thing is connect with everybody on LinkedIn from the job interview. Make sure you maybe want to send them a personal note on there as well as the thank you letter. One of my secret sauces is that I actually handwrite a thank you letter as well as an email letter. I send that relatively in a short period of time. So the thank you letter that's handwritten, I usually have 3 or 4 sentences ready to go. And I slip that under the door. If I'm in the facility, there's a receptionist at the front, I'll hand it to her and have them give it to the hiring manager or the staff or the group interviewing that I was with.
Ladies and gentlemen, Zack Ballinger. Make sure you pick up his new book along with all his other books. Zach, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Kerbal, I appreciate you having me. It's been a pleasure.
And also, listeners, please be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and share after listening. For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.